Hello, my name is Klaus Bosselmann. I'm a professor of environmental law at the University of Auckland, originally from Germany, where I was a professor of environmental law until the late 1980s at the Free University in Berlin. And ever since I was a young academic, even before, I had a great interest in Mother Nature. I grew up in a forest, luckily enough, and I was always fascinated by diversity of wildlife and nature as a whole. But then during my academic years, when I studied things like sociology, also ecology, philosophy, and ending up with law, I became increasingly intrigued by the Earth as a whole. And that has guided my work pretty much until today. Now, what do we all mean by the Earth? Of course, we all have very strong views of how we feel about our Earth and what we're doing to her. But I think one sort of key to understand the topic also that I'm going to cover here, Earth system law, is to appreciate the incredible importance of ecology, which is the kind of Western construct to appreciate the integrity of ecological systems, natural systems, including humans. So ecology has the science, after all, of interconnectedness between all living beings, has guided all my work. And so this Earth system law topic gives me really an opportunity to overlook my experience with environmental law, and particularly international environmental law and domestic environmental law in a comparative perspective. So looking at our beautiful planet that we all are so accustomed to in terms of its beauty and wholeness, we have to remind ourselves it's only in 1972 that we had the first really full picture of the Earth. And in fact, it has inspired many people at the time and ever since, not the least the Brundtland Report of the United Nations 1987 in its foreword refers to the Earth as the greatest inspiration in terms of its visual presence now available to us, greatest inspiration for humanity at large. So it was a really novel experience to reflect on the wholeness of the Earth. The same year, 1972, saw the staging of the UN Environmental Conference in Stockholm, the first Earth Summit, if you like. When you look into this photo, Maurice Strong is holding his report in his hand called Only One Earth. And Maurice Strong became a very influential advocate of Earth system thinking and the Earth Charter that I will also say a few words about. Then in 1992, this is when I was lucky enough to participate at the Earth Summit in Rio as a member of the German delegation at the time, where we were involved in negotiations on climate change and also on the idea of developing a Earth Charter, which was called upon by the Brundtland report, UN report, a few years earlier. But the Earth Charter did not come about. Nevertheless, states in Rio committed to a Principle 7 of the famous Rio Declaration, which reads, "States shall cooperate in a spirit of global partnership to conserve, protect, and restore the integrity of the Earth's ecosystem." So this is pretty profound, the integrity of the Earth ecosystem. Obviously, awareness of an ecological reality of how all aspects living aspects of this planet are connected and are interacting with each other. The Earth Charter that I just mentioned did not come about, but at that very Rio summit, we got together. This is just delegates from various countries and NGO representatives. We were about 80, 90 people, and drafted the first text of the Earth Charter, which in the further consequence was drafted by a commission and with the input of many, many thousands of people from all religions, all nations, all cultures from around the planet, in order to express the kind of key principles under which we as humanity should see ourselves, how we need to look after each other and how we need to look after life on Earth. These are the four key principles: respect and care for the community of life, ecological integrity, just mentioned earlier, social and economic justice, democracy, non-violence, and peace. So what we have seen since 1992 in the Earth Charter, then adopted in the Peace Palace in The Hague, we have seen many, many international agreements negotiated by states which refer to the need of states to protect the integrity of the Earth ecological system. But of course, it never really happened. This is just, a commitment on paper, so to speak. The Earth Charter was really reinforcing this commitment and has been quite instrumental for many, many universities, for example, not the least University of Auckland, where we adopted a policy in the year 2000 reflecting the Earth Charter principles. Meanwhile, parallel to these kind of governance modeling or the commitments of civil society, we have seen the progression of science, of course, the paradigm of the Earth system science. I call it a paradigm because it's still in its implication not fully understood, including Earth system scientists, of course, would admit to it. We do not understand exactly how Mother Earth functions. What we can tell, however, that the four spheres, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, that's, oceans and freshwater systems, the biosphere and the geosphere, that's sort of land-based, they are all obviously interconnected. This is almost a triviality to say this, but we have solid science around it and can act upon it. When we contrast the existing system of international environmental law to the oneness of the Earth, then it is rather striking that our current system of environmental protection at domestic and international level is, of course, largely shaped by the concept of sovereign states. And from the perspective of states, the Earth consists of basically two disconnected areas. One is the areas inside national territories, and the other area is outside national territories. And therefore, it comes with this kind of state-centered worldview that the internal side, domestic environmental law, is largely subject to the willingness of governments to provide for policies and laws. And in a similar vein, at international level, states would agree to certain treaties. And of course, we are all aware of climate change agreements and many others. And I won't go into any detail here, only to say that, of course, the tradition of international environmental law is to deal with environmental issues bit by bit. And therefore, we have a conglomerate of many treaties, commitments, really sort of in an unorganized way, assuming that somehow these bits and pieces can contribute to the restoration of the integrity of the Earth system. Unfortunately, the experiences haven't been so encouraging, as we all know. From a legal perspective, though, for quite some time, there has been a very good literature and also political declarations of some leaders by the United Nations to consider the duty of trusteeship as a duty that all states should accept. So from a current system of international environmental law, we can take the next step and think of Earth system law. And as you can see, all that is required, of course, there are many challenges behind it, but essentially the requirement is that states need to see themselves as trustees. Now, what is a trustee? It's a legal concept known in all legal cultures, a very ancient concept. It basically says that we need somebody who acts on behalf and in the interest of somebody else who cannot act for themselves. Think of parents acting on behalf of their minor children, or future generations for this matter, or Earth as a whole. So the idea of trusteeship is not new and has been, as mentioned, been sort of put forward by some states as well, smaller states, mind you. Malta comes to mind. I was lucky enough to work for the government of Malta in the 1990s, where we proposed the idea of a trusteeship council at UN level. So these ideas have been around for a while, and I will just continue with updating you on what's going on currently. The theory of the sovereign state is sort of changing according to some part of the literature. We should remind ourselves that, of course, a sovereign state basically is a vehicle to serve the needs of its citizens, right? And guarantee individual and collective self-determination. That being the case, the sovereign state is also an agent for us as citizens. And if we as citizens demand a sort of reconceptualization or increased responsibilities of the very sovereign state that we have allowed to be created, then of course the sovereign state will not be against it. But it is a plea for citizenship, being active, certainly legal scholarship, to formulate those kind of obligations that states eventually need to follow. So in essence, as a result, we would then see the concept of territorial sovereignty, which is sort of the prime core of the idea of the sovereign state, as harboring the right to use portions of the Earth system, the geosphere, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the biosphere, however, with associated overall trusteeship responsibilities. So the concept of rights and responsibilities is critical here, which brings me a little bit to human rights discourses, and I will just highlight this by saying that in 2017, some 100 human rights, environmental, and indigenous organizations gathered together in Utrecht and in The Hague in the Netherlands in order to draft a text for what we call the Hague Principles. And I was lucky enough to chair this working group that drafted the text, and it was then adopted in the Peace Palace on the 10th of December in 2017 to basically formulate how rights and responsibilities are related to support each other and support our natural environment. And I'm just only focusing briefly on principle 1 here, responsibilities for Earth. All human beings, individually and collectively, share responsibility to protect nature, of which we are an integral part. The integrity of Earth ecological systems and Earth as a whole, home of all living things. Each state individually and the international community of states collectively acknowledge that they share responsibilities for nature in cooperation and in alliance with their citizens as equal trustees of Earth and the integrity of Earth ecological systems. So these Hague Principles were sort of advertised through conferences, also with involvement of UN officials, always in pursuit of trying to capture new ideas of how we do better as humanity in protecting the global environment. And I briefly mentioned one initiative which came from the French government in 2016, a global pact for the environment. And we formed a UN working group that I was part of in order to persuade states to adopt a global pact for the environment. Unfortunately, at the time, a number of states, including the United States of America, Russia, Iran, China, and a few others, one of the, the bigger states, not the European Union, but those kind of states have rejected the idea of a treaty to protect the global environment. This is currently put on hold, and I'm hopeful it will be revisited in due course. But in the context of the Hague Principles here, the United Nations Secretary General approached our group, this is the Earth Trusteeship Initiative, and expressed interest in our work. And as visible, for example, in the report of the Secretary General, Our Common Agenda from September 21, it sort of looks ahead to the next 25 years and represents the Secretary General's vision on the future of global cooperation and reinvigorating inclusive, networked, and effective multilateralism. So this is basically the idea for a new initiative of the United Nations that now is sort of shaping up in a more firm way there's a commitment to a summit for the future. And also in this report, a calling on repurposing the UN Trusteeship Council, which is should be based on a report by what's called the High-Level Advisory Board on Effective Multilateralism. I've been asked to help drafting the report and advise the Secretary General on further steps. And this is likely to happen in the foreseeable future. Certainly, the General Assembly has already decided on holding a summit for the future in September 2024. And in September this year, 23, a ministerial meeting will take place in New York that helps shaping the agenda. So currently, this is a conglomerate of various environmental organizations, including the Earth Trusteeship Initiative that I'm chairing, are asked for our input. And the report of the High-Level Advisory Board is expected in June this year, and will definitely refer to the work that we have been doing and call upon states to consider a repurposing of the UN Trusteeship Council in order to adopt trusteeship responsibilities for the Earth as a whole. This is a long way off. I'm not optimistic enough to believe that's going to happen in the next 5, perhaps not even 10 years, but it is the way how the UN, by and large, is prepared to go. It will only go this way with strong support of civil society. There's no surprise there when it comes to the environmental field. Think of climate change. States are notoriously slow and really only responding to pressure. But I'm certainly hopeful that civil society has a much stronger voice now to propose ideas around trusteeship that states should accept. So this is therefore the general concept of Earth system law as I would define it. Hopefully you can see the difference from the perspective of a state-centered concept of looking at international law, only ever being interested in maintaining and advancing national interest, to a more elaborate understanding of what's in the interest of states. Obviously, we all share certain concerns for global issues, such as human rights are, of course, a prime concern, and we should never allow states to tell for us as civil society what they are prepared to do in order to protect those fundamental human rights that human beings enjoy. The same is true for the Earth as a whole. So you can see the correlation between human rights and concern for the environment. They are key concerns being expressed by civil society and certainly also by legal scholarship. So I'm very proud and happy to be part of this international movement of NGOs, of civil society, but also of great colleagues around the world, also here inside in New Zealand, Aotearoa, where we are working on what I like to define as Earth system law. I thank you for the attention, and I leave you with this beautiful image of Aotearoa. Thank you.